performance subject.
Well, good morning, dear students. We are back again and we'll be discussing the questions. So, the first question here is that there are moments in life when we have to make hard choices between our roles as private individuals and as citizens with a sense of loyalty. Discuss this with reference to the story that you've just read. Well, I've done the story in detail. I'll only hint at the relevant points to the answer to this question. Number one, you see, Sado is a trained doctor, and what happens once that at his doorstep an American Navy soldier is washed ashore, and so he and his wife are faced with this dilemma: whether they should save the person's life or whether they should hand him over to the police as a loyal citizen. Now, Sado decides that he would treat him because obviously he was a doctor, so he forgot everything and remembered except his professional duty and his humanity. He was able to rise above the narrow prejudices. But at the same time, he intended to turn him over to the police once he was well. That's what the dilemma was, and we could safely say that he was able to perform both his roles efficiently, his role as a doctor and his role as a citizen. Now, you can elaborate on this. Then we have question number two. Dr. Sado was compelled by his duty as a doctor to help the enemy soldier. What made Hana, his wife, sympathetic to him in the face of open defiance from the domestic staff? Well, you see, it was the humanitarian instinct in Hana which compelled him to be sympathetic towards the the enemy, that is the American soldier. She realized that there were always rumors that tortures or you know tortures were committed to the um, prisoners of war. Cruelties are committed, and the man also had red scars on his neck. This meant that he too was tortured, and she also, I mean, um, thinks of a person called Takema who was cruel to his own wife under his power. So she wondered whether what would such a man do to a prisoner of war under his power. So it was the human instinct, the instinct of humanitarianism within her, which forced her to sympathize with the American soldier. He was badly wounded, he was helpless, he was tortured. So the first thing he needed from another man was help. The other things came later, that is loyalty or country. First we are human beings, and then we are Japanese, Americans, Indians, or whatever. If we cease to be a human being, then we can never be a good patriot also. So Hana was inspired by humanitarian tendency. Then the next one is, how would you explain the reluctance of the soldier to leave the shelter of the doctor's home, even if he knew he couldn't stay there without risk to the doctor himself? Yes, in fact, he had been there, he had been looked after, so he started loving the family, because he realized that it was Dr. Sado who saved his life, and Hana also had served him gently and affectionately. So the interesting thing is that even the American soldier forgot all enmity. Although he was a soldier, even then, he um, overcame his instinct of war, etc., and he started loving the Japanese couple, and he wanted to live there. But obviously, the problem was that if he continued living there, then it would be a great threat to Dr. Sado and his family. Now, what explains the attitude of the general in the matter of the enemy soldier? Was it um, human consideration, lack of national loyalty, dereliction of duty, or simply self absorption? You remember that the general completely forgot to send the assassins to Sado's house, although he had promised that he would send the assassins. So this can be explained by way of you know 2 points. First of all, it was self-absorption. The general was quite lost in his illness, so partly it was because of self-absorption, and partly it was a dereliction of duty, negligence of duty. It was not lack of loyalty to the nation, um, or it was not at all human consideration. He was a tough man, he was a general, so partly it was dereliction of duty. He forgot his promise like that. He should not have forgotten. And later also he, you know, asked Sado to give testimony to his sense of nationality, to his loyalty, if the matter should come out in public. You know, so it is self-absorption and dereliction of duty. Now they say while hatred against a member of the enemy race is justified, especially during the wartime, what makes a human being rise above narrow prejudices? Well, I would say that hatred is not justified even during wars. But it so happens that if two countries are at war, then the passion of hatred somehow gets generated. Now, it is the humanitarian instinct in all of us. It is the feeling that we are first a human being that makes us rise above the narrow prejudices of nationality, regionalism, religion, etc. And we always, not always, but very often, if we have that instinct dominating our personality, then we are able to rise above the narrow prejudice, as was the case with Dr. Sado and Hana. Both of them, you know, were ultimately able to help the enemy soldier because he was wounded, he needed help. Now, this question is interesting and important. Question number 6. Do you think that Dr. Sado's final solution to the problem was the best possible one in the circumstances? Yes, indeed, it was the best possible solution. You see, he had saved his life, he has performed his duty as a doctor, and then he had performed his duty as a citizen by informing everything to the general and even agreeing with a plan with the general on a plan that he would send assassins quietly and get the American killed and have his body removed. But when the general forgot and you know the assassins didn't come, every night was a burden. Obviously, Sado was facing great problems. The servants had left the house. There was always the danger that they might inform the police. His wife was very disturbed. So the best possible solution was to let the enemy soldier escape, and he helped him escape, not because he liked him, but because he wanted to get rid of the enemy and to sort of because the man was, as he himself says, it was inconvenient to have him there at his house. So, you know, and when he realized that his prisoner had escaped successfully, he thought that it was the greatest reward for him, you know, having treated the patient and having performed his role as uh, a Japanese, he was finally able to help him escape. It would have been very cruel to kill that man himself, you know. I mean, he was a doctor, a soft-hearted man. Perhaps it was not possible for him to kill him. Moreover, what was more important was to behave like a true human being rather than, get stuck in narrow prejudices like nationalism, etc. So this was the best possible solution. He had no choice but to take that step, you know. Otherwise, he would have been in trouble. Does the story remind you of Birth by A.J. Cronin that you read in Snapshot last year? What are the similarities? Well, in one sense, it does. You remember in A.J. Cronin's Birth, Andrew performs an operation in a delivery case, and he is able to save a newly born baby's life by putting him in, you know, hot water and cold water, um, and he was able to bring him back to life. Um, Sado also performs an operation without an operation theater. He performed the operation at home, and there was no supporting staff. Hana, you know, helped him and gave anesthetic to the patient. So, this shows that if the professionals are inventive, then even in adverse circumstances, they can do things to produce results. So, you can elaborate on this. Is there any film or scene or novel you have read with a similar theme? Well, this is a subjective question. I, at least at present, don't remember any kind of story with a similar theme. But if you remember one, you may share it with me or with your friends on the group and discuss it. So, you see, uh, this brings us to an end of our discussion on the enemy. Now, I'd like to have your responses if you haven't understood anything, or your comments or your views. How better have you understood it? Your reactions. Please send a few reactions pointing out whether you liked it or disliked it. And after a long time, again, I'll request you to subscribe the YouTube channel Learn English with Akhlaq Ahmed. Watch it on YouTube, and you haven't really subscribed, neither 12F nor 12D. Only a few, two or three hardly, have done so. Please do it. Visit it just once and click the button subscribe, and that will suffice. So, um, this is the request then, and we have almost finished our first sessional course. Um, you see, should the wizard hit mummy? That lesson is remaining. I told you earlier that the material is available on the web page of our school. Now, in a few days' time, I'll meet you again, and whether you see, either I'll discuss the summary and question answers, or I'll do it in detail as I have done um, the enemy and other lessons. So, you see, please send in your reactions. I'll wait for it. So that's it from me for the time being. Um, Thank you very much. See you again.
Stop button.